Good morning, Brevio. My name is Kylie Jarvis, and on behalf of my consultants and I, we are extremely excited to be here today to go over your stakeholder analysis and engagement plan. So what are the next 10 or so minutes going to look like? We're going to go over a brief introduction of who your stakeholders are and why they're important. We're going to analyze all of these stakeholders. Then we're going to go through a stakeholder consultation and management plan, and then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. So for the sake of this presentation, we've broken up your stakeholders into 4 categories. The first being your funders. Now remember, these are the people giving money to the charities, either using the platform that Brevio provides or not. Then we have Brevio itself. Of course, you guys are some of the most important people here and do most of the decision making. So you're obviously one of our most important stakeholders. And then for charities, the 3rd and 4th sections, we've broken it off into 2. The charities as a whole and everything they stand for, as well as the charity workforce, who are the people actually doing all the work to apply for all of these grants, no matter where they come from. With that being said, let's break it down even further into who these stakeholders in these groups really are. For the funders, we have the public, the government, the voluntary sector, as well as the private sector, investments, and the national lottery. For Brevio, we have you, the board, of course, our lovely chairwoman, high-level management, think C-suite, and then, of course, our general employees from a wide variety of teams, sales, marketing, HR, finance, PMO, etc. For overhead of charities, this is more a macro level view. We have registered charities and non-registered charities, the recipients of the grants themselves, and then other charities outside of Brevio who aren't using Brevio. And then we have the charity workforce, which is, of course, the leadership board, the frontline employees, the grant writing employees, the consultants, and then the volunteers. For the analysis we conducted, we decided to plot each of your stakeholders on a graph that goes power and influence there on the left with the interest of stakeholders as their x-axis. And it breaks it into 4 quadrants. And as you can see in the top right, the yellow box, we have the stakeholders who have the highest level of power and are the most interested. We have the keep satisfied. These are stakeholders we want to, obviously keep informed and keep happy, but have less of an interest. Our keep informed box in the bottom right, these are the stakeholders who are highly interested in Brevio, but have a little bit less power than the most. And then lastly, in the orange box in the bottom left, we have the stakeholders who we just need to monitor. They usually require the least amount of effort because they have the lowest influence and aren't very, very interested in comparison. So who are these stakeholders? Well, in the manage closely box, that was the top right quadrant. These are the public, the government, the charity leadership boards who are making the decisions, as well as Brevio's board. In the keep satisfied quadrant, we have Brevio's management. Again, that was our C-suite management, and then the recipients of the grants themselves. Our keep informed quadrant, this is going to be our private sector, investments, national lottery, the voluntary sector, as well as our charity volunteers, registered and non-listed charities, and grant writing employees. And then lastly, our monitor quadrant, these are the people we just want to, keep informed where necessary, but don't necessarily have that much power or influence. These are our charity frontline employees, as well as the charity consultants that are hired. So how do we consult and engage with these charities? Well, for our stakeholders. For our stakeholders who are in the manage closely quadrant, these of course are the ones who have the highest level of influence and the highest interest. We want to inform them regularly in detail, coordinate decisions and approaches with them, and then we need to proactively report project milestones and achievements because, of course, these are the people who really, really care and who have the most power. We have to communicate the advantages and disadvantages of any projects that are being worked on, as well as build up, create, and maintain the best relationships possible. For stakeholders who are in the keep satisfied quadrant, again, these are the people who have very high levels of influence but are a little bit less interested. We want to, of course, regularly inform and keep them in the loop. But since they're not as interested as others, we want to manage what information they're receiving and be pretty selective about it. We want to avoid confrontation, but of course, take concerns into account about any projects that Brevio is, in fact, engaging in. For our stakeholders who we need to keep informed, again, these are the people with less influence but high levels of interest. We want to inform them promptly and comprehensively, of course, obtain their opinions, demand active cooperation since they're so passionate about Brevio, and take their comments and objectives very seriously. These are the people who are probably going to be engaged with Brevio the most. And then lastly, our stakeholders who we just need to monitor. These are the people who have the least amount of influence and interest. For them, we want to inform them when necessarily, and of course, take their concerns seriously. But with that being said, they don't have that much influence or interest, so we don't want to smother them. We need to adapt to their needs and of course, set targets for communication. So next into the stakeholder management portion. To break it down, we're going to go over and plot all of your stakeholders on this new synergy and antagonism map. Then we're going to go into a physical communications portion of what we recommend you communicate with. And lastly, we'll wrap it up with an event on what we think could be really helpful. So with that being said, let's go into Fauve's diagram here. We have plotted each of your stakeholders across this map, but of course we don't have the time to focus on every single one of them. So for the sake of this presentation, we're going to focus on the following four and where they should move. So of course, golden triangles is the place to be, but it would be silly to say that that is super, super easy and can be done overnight. So what we want to do is focus our zealots over here. We want to make them go a little bit to the right into the golden triangles. We want to bring our waverers up. We want to bring our opponents into the waverers section, and our moaners, we want to move them more into the passive section. So who are these people that we're focusing on? Well, we're going to start with our waverers, which are right over here. We're again bringing them into the golden triangle, and this is going to be charity leadership boards. These are going to be the people who might not necessarily have signed with Brevio that we're trying to get to use Brevio's product. So what are we going to do? We're going to consistently pitch Brevio and give insightful information on why they should partner with Brevio. We recommend statistics such as the success rate, the number of funds that Brevio has helped charities raise. We want to hear customer stories and advocacy. And then of course, all of the benefits of Brevio's amazing product and the automated process in which it functions. Next, to focus on our opponents who are down here. These are the charities on Brevio's competitor sites. So although they might not have a huge issue with Brevio, they're just not that interested and or passionate about coming to Brevio right off the bat. So what do we need to do? We need to, of course, sell them onto Brevio to just get them more into the waivers section. We can do this by offering a free trial and then actively comparing Brevio's benefits and statistics to that of the competition. So similarly as the waivers, we want to highlight Brevio's strengths, the customer advocacy stories, for example, and our customer success rates. The moaners, this is going to be our private sector. We're trying to, again, to reiterate, move them more into the passive section. And the private sector is essentially just consisting of people who maybe want to give back and donate, but aren't super passionate about it and might just do it to do it. And the reason they're moaners is because they just don't really want to be inconvenienced, right? They want to do this in the easiest way. They just want to give their money away and not necessarily have to jump through hurdles. So what we want to do is influence that mindset that I just described and actively showcase the time and effort savings with Brevio so that they're a little bit less likely to complain. We also recommend providing newsletters and hosting networking events, which we'll go into in a couple of minutes, to really get them a little bit more on the positive side. Lastly, our zealots. These are the people who are highly, highly, highly excited and passionate about Brevio's product. That's you guys, the chairwoman, the board. And obviously, we want you guys to be excited as possible about Brevio, but we also want you to engage in a little devil's advocacy to make sure that you're seeing any hurdles that may arise in the future so that you get over it, right? We want you guys to be a little bit more self-reflective, and you can do this by actively comparing Brevio's product with any opponents or mutineers. For our communication tool, we find that a lot of times there's a pretty big disconnect between charities who are receiving the funds and funders who are giving the funds, right? A lot of funders donate lots of money and they don't necessarily see where it goes. So we figured that Brevio could host a bi-weekly or weekly newsletter that goes out that highlights a charity and a funder who have connected through Brevio's platform and what they're doing with the funds they've received and how they're impacting the lives of tens, hundreds, thousands. You get the deal. We think this way of communication could be really, really effective, especially if we do it on a print version and a digital version. And lastly, for our stakeholder management, we really, really, really recommend a live networking event within and between the funders and the charities. Now, these charities don't necessarily all need to be signed up with Brevio. We would, of course, recommend the waivers come to it, but the goal of this is to have everyone meet in a super fun environment. We recommend an outdoor space like Regent's Park, and we want to serve cocktails or appetizers from local businesses that are maybe even partnered with Brevio. And the goal of this event is to allow charities to speak on behalf of their success and their funders about what they're doing with the funds that Brevio helped them raise, right? And the goal of that further is to then get a bunch of charities and funders who aren't partnered with Brevio to come over to Brevio. So let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. We cannot reiterate enough how important it is to actively monitor stakeholders in the case that their interests or influence change. Stakeholders can quickly move up into a different categorization. And for that reason, you need to make sure that you are managing each and every one of your stakeholders, no matter their power or influence. On behalf of my consultants and I, we thank you guys for listening and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you.